Jeff. Welcome back for round two. Your episode, I think it was one of the top ones. I really liked it. I didn't know about like the parachuting or all that stuff in the military.
Yeah.
I thought it was really, really cool. So I remember telling people, hey, you gotta know who Jeff Church is, and they're like, yeah. They seen the signs when you were running.
Yeah.
And I was like, you guys gotta check it out. And yeah, they said, oh, I didn't know about that. That's kind of cool. So I'm a little more scared now because if I get angry, I'm afraid you're gonna jump in a parachute and go in my house.
I probably won't get angry. and I don't have a parachute, so nothing to worry about.
Sweet. Now I wanted to get you on. So elections over.
Yep.
Most people, when I ask them for, hey, what are some things they don't want to talk about? Most people say they don't want to talk about politics, religion. Those two are one of the things I really like talking about. I think it's fascinating.
Those are some of the top two priorities of things to talk about.
Yeah, I think, for me, talking about politics is fine. Actually, I think it's good. It's necessary because it influences people's lives. Like, hey, this policy could influence you in this, or it could change this. I think it's something very important. Same thing with religion, but we might step back on that for today. But no introduction. I think we'll just dive into it. What did you think about the election so far?
Well, so far I thought we had really good results.
So you are a registered Republican, right?
I am a registered Republican.
How did that start? Like, have you always been a Republican, or?
I don't know that I have always been a Republican. With that label, those ideas, those values, those principles, yes. As you know, I grew up in the military. And military people are generally apolitical, right? The military frowns upon active duty soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines being active in politics. Like you can participate in politics, right? You can register and vote, and you have time to go do those things. But when you're on active duty, the military expects you to follow the lawful orders of the civilians elected over you or appointed over you, right? So it doesn't matter. Like, I was an Army officer under Democrats. I was an Army officer under Republicans. And it didn't matter who the elected leaders were. I had an oath to the Constitution of the United States of America, right, to support and defend that against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And as long as you were given legal, lawful orders, you were expected to follow them. So, in the military, when you're having the talk around the water cooler, politics often comes up, and you have disagreements and you have agreements, but when it comes time to go do your job, everybody, is a soldier, a sailor, an airman, or a Marine, and decisions aren't made based on how did you vote.
What happens if someone disobeys those orders? Has that ever happened?
Yeah, sure. I don't remember all the specifics, but I know when, under Just Cause, when we invaded Panama, or when we went to secure Panama, right? It all depends on how you look at it. We were there for, I think, legitimate reasons. I went to high school in Panama, like elementary school in Panama. So we had a break in between, but that's where I went to high school, was in Panama. So I had interactions there. And in 1989, we had Operation Just Cause, and I thought it was a just cause. I had just been commissioned as a second lieutenant in the infantry in the Army, and one of my friends who had been commissioned like a semester before me, I think he had graduated early, he was assigned to the 82nd Airborne Division, and when he met his platoon, they were loading up to go to Panama. So here's the new LT and the first thing they're doing is going to combat. So an interesting situation. I think we were there for a just cause. I forgot how we got onto this story.
No, that's fine.
But yeah, oh, I remember. So some of that incidents there was issues of the Panamanian government holding people in jails or in prisons. And for your audience, they'd have to go back and fact check me on all this, but just my recollection is that there was an officer who felt very adamantly about getting these people out of these Panamanian jails or prisons. And for whatever reason, the military hierarchy was not interested in what he was telling them or what he had to say about this. And so on his own, he left his military base and went down to one of these Panamanian prisons and basically bluffed his way in, saying, I'm here with the U.S. Army and all my guys are right outside and we're here to get these people. And if you don't do it, we're going to, raid this jail. And just my recollection of that was that was viewed as disobeying a lawful order. And in the military, you have, so an officer does not swear allegiance to a person, right? Our oath is to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And it's basically left up to the individual officer to figure out what that support to the Constitution means. Whereas, say, if you're an enlisted soldier, when I was enlisted in the Army, I swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America and the orders of those appointed over me. So people giving me orders, I had to do what they said. Mm-hmm. But the officer doesn't get that. So there's no loyalty to Trump. There's no loyalty to Obama. There's no loyalty to Bush, right? There's no loyalty oath. The oath is to the Constitution. And so this guy, although he might have been right that there were people being wrongfully held and tortured in these detainment areas, was found guilty of disobeying lawful order. So when you decide that what the military is doing is wrong and you act on it, a jury of your peers in the military usually is going to decide if you got that right or not. So how intense do you feel about the legitimacy of whatever is or is not happening, right? And then it's your duty to disobey a lawful order. So like we have the My Lai massacre in Vietnam that lots of people are familiar with, right? Mm-hmm. The guy who bore the weight of all of that on his shoulders was a lieutenant. And, he was tried by the military and found guilty of participating and leading a massacre. And it was the duty of all of those under his command to say, no, this is not right. We are not going to follow these illegal orders. So the military, a soldier is not, or a Marine or sailor or airman, they're just not autonomous. They're not just robots who do what they're told. They have a moral and legal obligation to understand the order that's being given, and then to question it if they think it's wrong. And then if who's ever giving that order is still insisting that it be followed, it's up to those individuals to decide whether or not that they are legal, lawful orders. And if they believe it's not a legal or lawful order, it's their duty to refuse. And then it all plays out later, right? Whether you got that right or whether you got that wrong.
what are those consequences if they're found guilty? Are they just kicked out, or is it?
Oh, no. Have you heard of a place called Fort Leavenworth?
Mm-mm.
Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. It's a military federal prison. So you can get convicted at a court martial and you can be reduced in rank and you can be given, up to a life sentence in prison at Fort Leavenworth. And in times of war, you might find yourself being put in front of a firing squad.
Really?
Yeah, it's not just, okay, you disagreed, you're out.
Mm.
I mean, that could happen too, right? There's the full range of things that could happen. It could be from, hey, don't do that again, to, depending on what it was, you're going in front of a firing squad.
Has there been any, or throughout your career in the military, has there been times where you didn't agree with like what America was doing? It'd be like a war or some decisions or something like that, where you're like, I don't like that. But I mean, I don't know if you did or did, but like stuff like that, you just weren't agreeing with it.
Yeah, there's been times. I shared with another retired officer just earlier this week, I think, a note that I had written during my second Iraq deployment. And like, I wasn't out leading campaigns on this, but it was basically a note to myself. And I said something to the effect of like, what I'm doing in Iraq is not worth my life or the life of any of my soldiers. We're just wasting our time and we're wasting our resources, and we should be here only for one purpose: to win.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if we're going to deploy our military somewhere and put them in harm's way, we should be 100% committed to winning, right? We shouldn't be there just to screw around in internal politics of another nation. We should be there for a strategic reason, a threat to the United States, and we should be there to win. And I didn't feel at the time that we were there to win. We were there screwing around, and it was costing people their lives, their limbs. Soldiers were getting injured and killed, and Iraqi civilians were caught in the crossfire. And it didn't feel to me like we were committed to winning. So, that's the note I wrote myself. I still have that index card. It's on my shelf at my house next to the desk I work at.
What do you think about when was it, like a few years ago, when they pulled the people from the Middle East?
Oh, the Afghan withdrawal?
Yeah.
That was a horrible disaster.
Why? How come? I heard two sides saying, well, yeah, it's good that now they're back, but then the other side was like, it was like a really bad plan. But like, how come it was?
Well, it seemed like there was almost no plan at all. That's not the way you leave a country, right? We've been there roughly 20 years. We had a lot of people working. I did 2 deployments in Afghanistan as well. So we had a lot of friends and a lot of people helping us to help the Afghan nation become more democratic, right? To get things like women and children freedoms and rights, to sort of bring Afghanistan, like people would say, we should bomb the Afghans into the Stone Age. Well, if you bombed them into the Stone Age, you'd be bringing them forward in time, because some of the things that they did there were very primitive. But anyways, we had lots of people helping us, and lots of people put their lives on the line every day. Like, we, the United States forces, generally speaking, would come to Afghanistan. We would be there for a year, and then we would go home, and someone else would replace us. So, like, if you were my Afghan counterpart on January 1st, or whenever the rotation cycle was, but let's just say January 1st, right? I'd get there, we'd shake hands. Hi, I'm Colonel Church. I'm here to help you. And you're like, thank you, Colonel Church. Good to see you. And then we'd be there a year, and we'd work hard. We'd get things done. you and I would have an understanding. We'd bond a little bit. But on December 31st, I packed up my bags and I went home. You still live there, right?
Yeah.
You and your family still live there. And right before I packed up my bags and went home, a new person came to replace me, and I introduced that new guy to you, and like, hello, here's Colonel X. He's your new partner. And Colonel X was like, hello, good to meet you. Hey, right? So we were in Afghanistan for 20 years, 1 year at a time.
Mm-hmm.
You were in Afghanistan every single day of those 20 years. And you and your family were at risk of being attacked and killed or every single day. Or I lived on a secure military base with soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, guns, artillery, helicopters, and jet fighters to keep me safe. You lived in your local community. So people put their lives and risked it all thinking that America was going to be there and help Afghanistan move into, the 20th or 21st century. And for a while we did, and people stepped forward, and women became legislators, and people ran for elections, and women and girls went to school, right? And then when we just out of the blue abandoned Afghanistan, that jeopardized all those people, all those lives, and it was not a good thing to do. Like, Bagram Air Force Base is a major runway that can land just about any kind of plane there is. And Bagram also happens to be very close to a place called China. And to just leave that airfield, not a good thing. We just left. Not only did we get our Marines killed, but we probably got a lot of Afghans killed who had fought and worked hard to create that democratic vision that we said we were going to bring to Afghanistan. But again, did we have the will to win? Were we committed? And that's the challenge, I think, for allies of America. Are we committed to your cause? Like, if dissidents in the Middle East rise up against theocratic governments, will we actually be there to support those people?
Okay, so that's why a lot of people are upset. There was I know a few people that now they're veterans. One of them, I don't want to say the name, but he said that, I think if I remember right, he mentioned that he had, he's been deployed there, and he had, friends that have died there, and he said, now, what was it, all for nothing?
Yeah.
So that's okay.
Well, and that's kind of the issue, right? You feel like I did 2 deployments in Iraq, 2 deployments in Afghanistan, and 1 deployment in Kosovo for my combat tours. What did we get out of that? I had lots of friends, and like on my first deployment to Iraq, I think we had, just in one day, we had something like 13 soldiers killed in the battalion that I was in from a car bomb. We were partnered with Iraqi Civil Defense Forces, right? They went through several different names. At the time, they were the ICDC. And we were partnered with them, and we were at their post. And, we lived, we ate, we slept there with them. And a guy drove a taxi through the entrance to that post and just punched it and ran the taxi into the barracks area where our soldiers were sleeping and detonated it. Now, he was doing the typical terrorist thing. He was dressed up as an Iraqi police lieutenant, and he just basically bluffed his way through the Iraqi checkpoint that controlled access to that facility. And as soon as they raised the barrier, He punched it, drove the taxi right up into the building and detonated. So I think it was like 13 soldiers just that one day, plus all the casualties that you have.
Mm.
So, people often talk about, well, these terrorists are just cowards. Like that guy, whoever it was, he's just a coward. I'm not sure that he's a coward. Like you are going head to head with the United States Army.
Mm.
All of our assets, all of our resources, all of our equipment, all of our intelligence. And you're basically just in your clothes, or as people would, your man dress. In his case, he had gotten an Iraqi lieutenant uniform. And you have maybe a rifle, right? And you're attacking tanks, jets, helicopters, well-armed soldiers, and the chances are you're not going to survive. To me, that is not cowardly. It's a very dedicated, motivated fight for the wrong reasons from our perspective, of course, but I wouldn't call it cowardice. I don't think that they were cowards taking on the U.S. military. Now, when you just go into a civilian market and do that, and your targets are unarmed civilians who are just trying to live their life, yeah, that's cowardly. But attacking the U.S. military, I don't think that's cowardly.
What causes these terrorists to do this? Like, what's this whole, like, with that war?
Mm-hmm.
What's it about? Like, why were we in there, or why are they attacking us? What is it?
Well, I'm not one of them, so I don't know their perspective. I'm not them, but my understanding is it has to do more with religion, right? Where their religion is politics, and their religion is the way that you govern the people and the land. And so we have, right, I would often talk about we, America, and our allies were in Iraq or in Afghanistan for political reasons. Some might even say economic reasons. Whereas the people that we were fighting, they were fighting for their eternal lives, right? So who's the most motivated to win that fight? Somebody who thinks they are fighting on behalf of their God, or someone who just got sent there for a year, to free Iraq, to prevent weapons of mass destruction, right? Who's more motivated?
Yeah, I get it.
Generally speaking, I would argue that the other side that was fighting for their eternal life is probably more motivated.
With this new administration, with Trump coming into office, do you think there's like a plan? Or actually, let me backtrack a little bit. Do you think we should interfere with other countries? Was it more complicated?
What's the reason that we would be there? That's the question, right? National strategic interests.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, every nation has strategic interests in other parts of the world. We have strategic interests in other parts of the world. But just because we don't like you, like Muammar Gaddafi, we didn't like him. And I wasn't part of anybody's administration, right? I mean, I was a soldier at times for 30 years, but I wasn't involved in, White House decision briefings. So I speculate from the outside as well. I don't know the inner decisions, but why did we need to invade Libya? Why did we need to generate that fight? There's stories on both sides of this argument. We were there for democracy and wonderful good reasons, and then there's other talk that we were there just for political advantage and economic advantage, right? Mm-hmm. So there are some evils that can't be ignored. But again, it goes back to, if we're going to commit our resources, our human treasure to a fight, we need to be willing to win, right? We shouldn't just willy-nilly fly around the globe and have a little skirmish here and a little skirmish there and another little skirmish over here. We should have a serious will to win. Like when we fought World War II,
Yeah.
we had a goal, total victory, right? Total victory. There's not going to be an agreement. We're not going to negotiate with you and leave you in control of some of Europe, or leave you in control of some of the Pacific. Total victory. We're going to win. And right? What happened in the end of how did World War II end? When we dropped a couple atomic bombs. We were committed to winning. Now, we don't do that anymore, right? We should be committed to winning, and to winning at any expense before we go deploying soldiers to another country to overthrow a regime we disagree with. And the people of Iraq that I talked to, most of them, after the initial euphoria of the invasion, sort of lost their joy and gleefulness. And I think there was a lot of them that came to just wish there had never been an invasion, because life under Saddam was hard, especially if you were not in his graces. But it was predictable. You could go to the market, you could get your food, you could come home, you could cook, you could sleep, you could eat, right? You could live your life without a constant fear of being blown up by an IED, or shot by a rifle, or accidentally killed by Allied gunfire, right? Life, although it might have been hard, was something that you could live under. Whereas with that invasion, life now became something that you might die under. So I think a lot of, again, I'm not an Iraqi. I didn't live in the communities, but I worked with them. I think that probably a lot of them got to the point where they wished we hadn't invaded.
Yeah, I feel like I think a lot of American citizens don't realize what goes on, like in the military, or how is combat. They don't know, like we're spending resources, but also you got friends that risking their lives. This. So
let me just say that the individual soldiers and the individual units that are deployed to these combat areas, they're not there screwing around, right? They're there to win, because like any attack for a soldier is a frontal attack, right? Which is the worst form of military maneuver. Like, you try not to conduct frontal attacks. But as a soldier, every single thing that you do is a frontal attack, because you're moving forward. Now, in the grander scheme, right, there's the great big arm out into the desert, and all the units are doing a maneuver out into the desert that is not a frontal attack. But you, the soldier, is a frontal attack. So I think that our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine, our special operation forces especially, they're there. They're committed to the mission. They're doing the best they can every day. But as you get higher up in the ranks of the military and the government, there start being other considerations, right? It's those other considerations that cause us to not be committed to winning. So again, I would just say, first off, under Trump, administration number 1, we didn't have any new wars.
Yeah, you're right.
We didn't go anywhere. The Middle East didn't blow up, all right? When was Russia invading Ukraine?
It was in January during Biden's, right? Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Russia did Russia invaded places under most recent administrations except Trump. Trump had no new wars. Trump had the Abraham Accords, right? So all the rhetoric about like, he's a violent Hitler-like invader of countries, false. No new wars under Trump. I don't know if there'll be no new wars under Trump admin 2, but if we look to the past, during those 4 years, there wasn't anything. And we didn't have a disaster in Afghanistan. We were getting out. Like, I was in Iraq when Obama just arbitrarily said, we're leaving. And so we had to pack up our bags, and we just left. We were like, goodbye, good luck. We just left. And then we had to come back because just leaving left a huge mess. Didn't solve any problems. And so we had to come back, and we gave it a new name, right? We gave it, what was it? Operation New Dawn. We went back. We had to go back under Operation New Dawn to start cleaning up the mess we made when we just pulled out the first time, right? So again, are we leaving our allies in a better position or a worse position? So I think around the world, people probably ask themselves, if we do this, does America have our back? And I think, since 2001, maybe we don't have their back.
What do you think about because overall during the election, I wasn't surprised Trump won. And actually, I'll give my opinion. So my stuff, if people want to know, I'm registered as an independent. I know you always tell me, hey, registered Republican.
Yeah.
So I'm an independent. When it was Trump versus Biden, I voted for Biden. And then these 4 years happened. I feel like everything got a little expensive. So this year, I was debating on if I should vote for Trump or Oliver Chase. But I was like, I feel like I might waste my vote. So this time I voted for Trump. That's how it is. I don't have like a political party. I go to the Republican stuff. I try to go to the Democrat. I can never find it. I got different options.
Yeah.
But I'm not a centrist. I feel like that's also bad. A good and a bad thing about me, I think, is I'm open-minded. I could change my mind, but that's also bad because I could get influence on either side. So this time I voted for Trump. You know what helped a lot? Charlie Kirk. I started watching him a lot. I became a fan. Before, I didn't like the guy. I was just ignorant, and I paid more attention, especially the stuff he was doing in colleges. And Tulsi Gabbard. Mm-hmm. And then also it was Kennedy Jr. when he switched. Yeah. So I started paying him a little more attention to see what's going on. And also when Trump was doing other interviews, especially with the Joe Rogan stuff, and also J.D. Vance. I think it was the first time. What surprised me was the debate with the vice presidents. Mm-hmm. I did not think J.D. Vance. At first, I was like, "Oh, they're gonna just talk about they're gonna be unprepared, this and that." But he's actually he seemed like a cool guy. They all seem cool. One thing that I admire, I was looking back on, it was during Hillary and Trump. I remember I saw the clip. They were talking about taxes. How I think that they were attacking Trump, saying, "Oh, well, you do, you go through these loops or whatever." And I remember Trump telling Hillary, saying, "Hey, I follow the same thing what you guys do. Right. You could change it if you want. You've been there, I don't know how many years." And I was like, I guess that's right. Because also with
number one, I think one of the biggest issues this election cycle was people's pocketbook, right? Things just cost more, and it doesn't matter how many times someone tells you it's transitory, it's good, right? You just don't understand economics. But when you go to the store and you put 4 or 5 things in your cart and you go to the checkout and they say, that's $125. And you're like, how can some bananas and a carton of milk and a 6-pack of soda be $100? That's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Right? So I think number one, every single day, like when you go fill up your car.
That's expensive now.
Gas is expensive, right? So people, maybe they don't understand economics, but they do understand it costs me a whole lot more to buy stuff that I used to be able to buy for a whole lot less. So they understand that. They can look at their balance at the end of every month and go, wow, I have a lot less than I used to. Or I have to decide now between which bill do I pay? Or how much do I charge on my credit card? So people might not be economists, but they know when their finances aren't going right.
Yep.
So I think that was a big factor in this election, was just the economy and how much things cost now. And it annoys me quite a bit when presidential candidates say, I'm going to lower taxes. No, you're not. You don't have the constitutional authority to do anything with taxes. Congress is responsible for taxes.
That's why it's very important.
Congress writes the tax code. And people are like, oh, there's a billionaire loophole in the tax code. Well, if there's a loophole in the tax code, it's Congress's fault. Congress created whatever loophole there is or isn't in the tax code, right? Trump said something like, during that debate, he said, like, I don't pay taxes, right? Because I use the tax code. The tax code for Donald Trump's taxes and the tax code for Jeff Church's taxes is the exact same tax code. Whatever loopholes available to Trump is available to Jeff. And it's not the president, it's Congress. So if we don't like the way, if the top 10% billionaires don't pay their fair share, well, that's on Congress, right? The law is the law. Congress writes the law. If we don't like the law, then we should have Congress write a different tax code. If you want a flat tax, if you want more taxes, if you want less taxes, that's all up to Congress. Can the president be influential and talk from behind the Resolute desk and tell Americans we need a different tax law? Yeah, sure. He can use his executive resources to influence the discussion, but it's Congress that writes and passes tax law.
That's why it's important. People should also pay attention who they're voting for Congress, for their senators or House of Representatives. I did an episode on, it was Cheryl Johnson. She was running against Dusty.
Yeah.
And
South Dakota mom.
Yeah. I think she's a nice person. She's a nice woman. The only thing, I had some, overall, I think it went fine. Some lady commented, she commented on the video, and I remember what it said. She said, this interviewer, you handled it great, Cheryl. I'm like, I'm just asking questions. Because this one, it was important because, they're candidates, and I want to know what their plan is.
What's your position?
Yeah, and I want to be like devil's advocate. I need to know what's going on. I know, for example, when we were talking about it, if I remember right, apologize, Cheryl, they were talking about, she mentioned about taxing the rich. Yeah. I remember that. And I was giving the examples. I was like, but also if I remember right, don't rich people, if they have more money, that means of course they want to make more money, so they'll probably invest more, and that creates jobs, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. It makes sense because if I have, let's say, if I have more money, of course I'll save some, but you kind of just want to spend more, and that helps. Maybe let's go to a restaurant. Oh, that helps this business. Yeah. Oh, I'm gonna help this guy, or let's buy this. It will generate,
creates demand.
Yeah, I think that's how
demand creates greater production.
And one thing throughout these 4 years, because we moved here during 2020 September, so that's when Biden won. So we had these 4 years under him, and this is the first time, having my family, I have a job. I'm outside. I just graduated. So now I understand like what goes on. Like I understood how my parents worked. So what I'm trying to get at is, you start making, for example, this happens with us. You make money, and I'm like, oh, this is great. Tax season comes, and then they give you something. Then you start, moving up because I want to move up in the company. I want to do this.
Yeah.
You start making more, and then you start getting less, and then you're like, what? Then the next year you pay. I'm like, what? Then both of us work, and hopefully we're moving up, and then we start like we were selling tacos, or we're doing this, and we generated more money, and then I'm like, oh snaps, we gotta pay like. It was insane. It was like, I don't know if it was insane.
Yeah, you got to watch your tax bracket because making more money can cost you more money.
Yeah, and then that's one of the things, because I remember talking to my dad about it. I was like, hey, if I make more, I got to pay more?
Yep.
He's like, yeah. I'm like, that kind of seems a little backwards sometimes.
Just be thankful that you live in South Dakota, a state with no state income tax, because if you lived in a different state, you'd also have to pay a state income tax. And so that's more money out of your check.
Well, let's talk about the South Dakota elections. I want to go through some of those ballots initiatives. And I'm not afraid. I'll tell you what I picked. And some people will probably be like, why'd you pick that? Or be like, hey, you did pick that. So Chris Casson when I talked to him, he was a big fan of not doing that. What was it?
I am 28.
Yeah, if I remember right. So they wanted to, this is how I thought at first, and good thing I did talk to him about it. I thought it was just eliminate grocery tax, a food tax.
I am 28.
Yeah, but Chris Casson was explaining that the wording was way off, and I remember going to the meetings, and I looked at it, I got the packet, and I was like, yeah, it says human
consumption,
which can mean anything.
Right.
And then at first I was like, well, that means lower taxes until, the state or whatever, it could be city, state, county, whatever, they rely on those taxes. If they eliminate that, they're going to find something else, which could be property taxes.
Yeah, or even create a state income tax.
Yeah, and one of the reasons, so I voted no on it. I was like, hey, okay, I guess the majority won on that. But why not just put food tax? Like, what's the why?
There's other ways to do it, right?
Yeah.
So just for all of us in Vermillion, Vermillion Unplugged, if you have the capability, go do your grocery shopping in Iowa. Right? Just drive down past Dakota Dunes and go into Sioux City and buy your groceries down there, because Iowa does not have a grocery tax.
Does Nebraska have a grocery tax?
I'm not sure. I don't know. I know Iowa does not.
Mm-hmm.
So, like when we have things to do down in Sioux City, we'll make time to go grocery shopping there.
That's what we do too.
Mostly we shop here at Walmart in Vermillion, but when we're in need of grocery shopping and we have a reason to be in Sioux City, we put those two together. Now, don't buy your sodas in Iowa because they charge a recycling tax.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So it's something like, I don't know, 10 cents a bottle. Like if you buy a 2-liter bottle of Coke, you'll pay whatever the charge was, plus I think an additional 10 cents, because they do a recycling program, right? Where when you bring that bottle back, you get that 10 cents back for recycling.
Ah, okay.
So, Vermillion, if you can, go down to Iowa, buy your groceries in Iowa, don't pay that food tax, and then come back to Vermillion and live and work in South Dakota and don't pay a state income tax. There's a couple of, like, you can do that in Washington State as well. Washington State has no state income tax. Oregon has no sales tax. So if you live in a place, near the border between Washington State and Oregon, you can pay no state income tax in Washington State and pay no sales tax when you shop in Oregon.
Oh, so this
stretch your dollars a little bit further, right? Assuming that you can offset the cost of the gas for driving to and from wherever you're shopping, which again, that's why we don't, hey, I need groceries, just drive to Iowa. We need to already be going there for some other reason. because of the gas that you're spending to get there and back, and because of the eventual maintenance that will have to be done on your vehicle for the mileage that you put driving back and forth.
Oh, okay.
If we can combine the two events,
Yeah.
that's what we do. Like, I'll put a cooler in the back of the car to keep the cold stuff cold while we drive back to the house.
That's exactly what we do too. We'll go like every 2 weeks, and we'll hit a South Sioux City we'll pick up all the stuff.
Yeah.
And which I think it's a little more cheaper over there. Now one of the next ballot.
So
gee.
on IM-28, when I was a candidate during the primary, and we had our Vermillion Meet the Candidates question session, well, that was one of the questions. Hey, do you support this grocery tax? And as a Republican, one of our platforms is lower taxes. And so I was like, broadly speaking, generally speaking, I support lower taxes. We're not going to get to a zero taxes, though, because taxes pay for things like our police, our firemen, our EMS, our public services, like our road repair, our utility work, right? Taxes pay for infrastructure type things and emergency service things that we all benefit from having.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to have some level of taxation, right? But generally speaking, as a Republican, I'm for lower taxes. And so when we were asked about this grocery tax, I said, yeah, I generally support lower taxes. And if we can do it, then I would support something like IM-28 for lower taxes, because a food tax is a very regressive tax.
Mm-hmm.
And, for the audience, what that means is the less money you make, the more you pay on things like food as a proportion of your budget, right? If you make $10 and you spend $1, that was 10% of your budget. But if you make $100 and you spend $1, that's just 1% of your budget, right? So the food tax is a regressive tax, which I would like to move away from as much as we can. But doing a little bit more research, right, that was not a food tax. That was a consumption tax.
Which do you mean?
Anything, right? So the problem with that language was, what's human consumption, right? And we think, intuitively, we think, oh, it's something that I eat or drink. But let's just take an example. What about toilet paper? What's toilet paper's primary method of consumption? Who primarily consumes toilet paper? Humans.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're not eating it, but we are consuming it. When we go shopping, we're called consumers. So could we make the argument that no car should have a sales tax associated with it, because cars are built for human consumption, right? We consume the car. But it just, again, it was one of those issues where you would have to pass the law to find out what's in it. And, you get good attorneys who can twist language and intent, and you could make an argument that anything humans use is human consumption, and therefore there should be no tax on it, which then all of that revenue to our city and to our county and to our state goes away. But the need for the services that tax money provides don't go away. So where does that money come from now? You're going to have to raise taxes somewhere else or create a state income tax, right? And people are like, oh, well, we'll raise property taxes. And a lot of people who rent say, yeah, screw it, raise property taxes. I don't care. I don't own a house. I don't own land. Whatever, raise property taxes. Doesn't affect me, but it does. Because the person that you're renting from now has to pay a higher property tax. And they're probably not going to just eat that increased cost. They're going to pass it on to you, and you're going to see your rent go up.
Another thing would be, I've heard tuition could go up.
Yeah, all kinds of things would have to go up to replace that lost revenue. So I voted no on IM-28.
Okay, me too. Another ballot. Yeah, I'll start maybe with some of the. I don't know if it's like important or
But
not.
here, I brought the list.
You got it.
Yeah.
What about that one that's talk about the? Is it the gender name?
Yeah, so that was Amendment E.
I heard some people they said, oh, well, it doesn't really matter, yes or no. But was it a super big deal with y'all, or
So it wasn't a super big deal for me, right? In legally speaking, when you are using official documents, publications that say things like he, his, him, it is legally understood to mean both genders. All right, so you may be like, why does it always say he? Because I'm a she. In the legal mentality, that he applies to men and women, right? But some people didn't want that. They wanted it to be gender neutral. But let's think about that for a second. What if, so what it really gets down to is you would have to reprint everything. And reprinting everything costs money, right? You have to pay for the ink. You have to pay for the paper. You have to pay for the printer who does the work, right? The printer has to pay the employees who do the work. So there's costs associated with reprinting everything. And let's just take governor, right? Who's our current governor?
Christy? No.
And we can assume that she is a she, right? But what does governor, is governor a masculine title or is it a feminine title?
Is it like gender neutral?
Is it?
Governor.
What's
both, right?
What's a female governor called?
Just governor.
Or is it governess?
No, it's just no. Isn't it just governor?
Or is it governess?
I don't know. Is it?
So a lot of times, right? If you're a filthy rich person who hires someone to watch your kids every day, and she's a female, she's often called a governess, not a governor. So again, you'd have to get into a legal discussion. Well, is governor neutral or is it masculine? And then every time, right? And if we like, well, it's governor is masculine.
Okay.
Then every time we got a different sex governor, we'd have to reprint everything that said governor or governess.
Yeah.
Right? You don't know. It gets out of control. So I think probably most people, and what I've heard is generally true with people, is that if they don't know about something, they're usually going to vote to keep the way it is. And so I think you didn't hear a lot of discussion about Amendment E. And when people went in to vote on it, they probably said something like, I don't know a lot about Amendment E. It's not bothering me right now, so I'm going to vote no. But across South Dakota, right, 43% of the voters voted yes, and 57% of the voters voted no.
I voted no only because I feel like it didn't matter too much, but because of the reprinting. I don't know if it said either $2,000 or $20,000. I feel like it would cost to reprint when I saw the pros and cons. So I was like, I don't want them to use my tax dollars to reprint. So
yeah,
I voted no.
And you might end up reprinting it every 2 years.
Oh yeah.
So
okay.
Not a good thing. I would just like to say to all of the viewers here that, are they viewers or are they listeners? They could be both.
Yep, both.
All right. So for all the people listening or watching, South Dakota had, I think, an amazing voter turnout this past election. The official statistic is 69.92% of registered voters voted. So for simplicity, let's just round up 0.08 and say 70% of South Dakota voters voted in this general election, which is outstanding. And it's even more impressive when you realize that during the primary election, only 17% voted. So this presidential election cycle, with all of the state issues that we had as well, brought out 70% of voters across the state. So, yeah, we got 30, right? There should be 100% voting going on. But statistically speaking, 70% turnout is awesome.
So this is the demographic that represents South Dakota. Probably.
Yeah, this is from the Secretary of State's website, which anybody with internet access can log into and track down all of this information as well. But South Dakota should be proud of itself for putting out 70% of the vote. That's a good number.
That's good. I think 2 years ago or whenever they have it, I think it was like one of them. I remember looking at it, or maybe it was just Clay County. It said like 30 or 35%, something like that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We should, regardless of how the votes turned out, we should congratulate ourselves in South Dakota that 70% of us voted. That's good.
That is good. I like it. Now, speaking of the other issue, actually, there's another one that I do want to talk about. The recreational marijuana.
Yeah. So
that one got, what was it called?
I am 29.
Okay, I am 29.
Yep.
So so this is what I thought it was legal already. I thought they passed
medical marijuana.
That's what
legal.
They passed. A few years ago? Or
yes.
Okay, they didn't pass this and they got shut down.
So we had something that passed. I don't remember what it was, but there was legal challenges to whatever had been passed, and it was overturned and tossed out. So we didn't have recreational marijuana.
Oh, okay.
But we do have it. Medical marijuana is already legal in the state, and this was working to bring recreational marijuana to legalize that in the state.
What was your opinion on it?
Well, I voted no.
Voted no?
Yeah.
So on that one, and this is where I branch out, and I'll tell people why, and it's super strange. So I don't smoke, I don't do drugs, I don't even drink alcohol. I've never had a drink. Now, I don't drink because I just never had one. People say, hey, well, don't do it. Like, okay.
Yeah, don't start.
Yeah, don't start. I don't smoke.
Me either.
There we go. The only reason I voted yes, and they voted out no, and it doesn't really matter too much for me. Yeah. I voted yes only because I feel like, I might be wrong, I feel like, hey, if you're 18, you could, I guess, do whatever you want, as long as it doesn't affect me. This is where the strange part, and I was talking to my wife about it. Like with alcohol, that one's legal. So in my eyes, and of course I could change, if that one's legal, then the marijuana should be legal. If not, both of them should be illegal. That's just my view. But what are your thoughts? Maybe I'm thinking just wrong.
You're not thinking wrong. There's no wrong. Maybe there are, but
depending.
I was going to say there's no wrong thought, but maybe there are wrong thoughts. Well, just so everybody listening who knows, here's how I am 29, the measure to legalize recreational marijuana, turned out. This is what those 70% of voters said. 44% voted yes. 56% voted no. So it was 189,812 yes. It was 237,093 who voted no. So I voted no because this isn't a new topic. There's other states in our nation that have legalized recreational marijuana, and some have legalized other more hardcore drugs. So we have places that we can look and see how did it actually work out? Not just what people said would happen, but what really happened. And I know that you can, right, being a student, I know that you can choose your sources and you can cite to somebody that agrees with you, and you can cite to somebody who has a different opinion, right? So a lot of times people will go to citations that support their view. But objectively, I think that what we've seen overall is first, this was said, hey, we're going to generate revenue, right? Because people are doing recreational marijuana illegally.
Mm-hmm.
So when they buy that weed illegally, there's no sales tax. But if we legalize it, we'll be able to collect that income on that sales tax. Unless IM-28 passes, because then that weed is for human consumption.
Oh.
And would you be able to tax it since it's for human consumption? But, we won't find that out for the next 2 years at least, because neither of them passed. But there are studies, like in Colorado, that show for every $1 of sales tax they raise on the sale of recreational marijuana, they end up spending $3 in costs because of the use of that marijuana. So there's studies that show a lot of traffic accidents involve both alcohol and marijuana. So you see an increase in traffic incidents. And even if there's no injury, it costs money to the state, because a police officer has to respond to the accident and has to do an investigation and has to write up a report and file a report, right? And then if there's a citation and that person wants to go to court, now you have to dedicate all that time to going to court. So generally speaking, the revenue was 3 times less than the expenses. And then there's studies that cite when recreational marijuana is approved that things like petty crimes, burglaries, thefts, assaults go up. And then there's studies that say the human brain doesn't fully, not form, but doesn't fully resolve itself until about the age of 21. And so there's issues with, does marijuana affect the development of the brain, right? So it kind of gets to your issue of the alcohol, right? If you can buy alcohol at 21, why can't you buy marijuana? So here's another issue with that, right? If South Dakota passed IM-29 and legalized recreational marijuana, it's still illegal federally.
Oh.
Right?
Okay. Yeah.
So that's not impossible to do. States can have a law that says yes, and the federal government can have a law that says no, but now they're in conflict. So let's say you are a South Dakota Air National Guard soldier, which means most of the year you do your civilian stuff. And let's say while you're doing your civilian stuff, you choose to partake of legal recreational marijuana in South Dakota. But then something happens in the world and we have to mobilize you and put you under federal military control and deploy you somewhere to do something for the national strategic interest of America. But the night before you were enjoying your recreational marijuana. And now you have to show up to work as a federal soldier or airman. Now when you pee in the cup and they test it, now you come back hot. You have a hot urinalysis for THC. And now, instead of deploying to save America's strategic national interest, you go to jail. Because it's a federal crime. You can't ingest marijuana while you're a soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine. And you're arguing, but I did it before I got mobilized. And right, some wonderful prosecutor in the Air Force will say, I don't care, you peed hot while you were mobilized, and you were an active duty airman. So you can have issues like that come up, right? But it was legal, yeah, but but it isn't now,
Oh, okay.
right? And it takes a little bit of time for that to get out of your system. So if you had your urinalysis within a certain window, you'd come back hot. And they'd be like, that's a violation of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And we're going to make an example out of you and prosecute you.
If they did legalize, like if they did pass, do you think there'd be like a lot more consumption, or do you think maybe there'd be a few, but
I don't know if there'd be more, right? Because we know that folks partake of recreational marijuana even though it's illegal.
yeah.
I don't know if there'd be more. I would venture to say that, yeah, there'd probably be more because the fear of being fined or jailed would go away, and there might be people more willing to try it, right? Because it'd be legal. So I would say, yeah, consumption probably would go up. I don't know that anybody would be addicted to it, but.
Now, what about that view I had with the alcohol and the marijuana, where I said, well, this one's legal, why shouldn't this one be? Or they should both be illegal. Do you think that's a right, well, there's no right or wrong view, depending on what it is, but that mentality, am I thinking right? Because there used to be that prohibition, and that went really, really bad.
Yeah.
So
yeah, why? Because people just drank illegally.
Yeah.
Or they made their own shine.
So could that also be the same thing with the drug thing or not? Because is it San Francisco where everything is legal? I swear I saw something like from Charlie Kirk with a student, and he said, yeah, they tried, or in San Francisco, it's legal, I believe, everything, even the hard drugs, and crime and everything is actually like, it's horrible. It's horrible. So that's why I was wondering, like, would it be fine or not?
Well, again, I go back. So the studies that I looked at researching this, because, I'm a Republican, and one of the things that Republicans believe in is individual liberty, right? And if you look at it from a religious perspective, God told Adam and Eve, everything here I made for you to use, right? So marijuana is a naturally growing plant, or it gets cultivated now, but it's a natural plant, right? So you could use the religious argument, hey, God said it's here for you to use. And you could say, well, it's legal too, so I'm going to do it. But the studies that I've seen indicate that where marijuana or drugs are legal, crime goes up, injuries go up. And so I did talk about that, and I thought about it and pondered in my own mind about this individual liberty piece. But here's a problem. When someone partakes of recreational marijuana legally, it's not just an individual event. Because when that person drives somewhere under the influence of their legal recreational marijuana, and they're involved in an auto accident, that involves somebody else. So it's not just an individual event. It involves society. So I voted no, just because I think that the studies indicate the promised benefits aren't there, and that the cost to individuals and society, like there's another study that shows that teen suicide increases under legalized recreational marijuana.
Really?
More people kill themselves where marijuana is legal. So again, is that helping the people, or is it hurting the people? And what costs are associated with that? So again, viewers and listeners will be able to go pull studies that say the studies that I'm saying exist are erroneous and full of crap. And here's this one person who had a wonderful life after legalized recreational marijuana, right? So you'll build a cite to whatever sources you choose, and you'll come up with different arguments. I'm just sharing with the audience what I saw and what I thought about and what I talked about, and that's why I voted no.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, that one's a good argument. Now I want to talk about the big one. I think it's a big one, the abortion one, Amendment G.
Amendment G.
So did y'all guys do a lot of? I saw the signs, but did you guys do like any advertisement, like online or anything?
Yes, we did a lot of work.
Hmm?
South Dakota Right to Life did a lot of work. There was a lot of people in the state who did a lot of work. Vermillion Right to Life did a lot of work. The people in that organization did a lot of individual work. Union County Right to Life did a lot of work. There was a lot of work done on defeating Amendment G. And there's a lot of misunderstanding about Amendment G. So just so the people who are listening or watching, here's how Amendment G turned out. There were 41% of South Dakotans who voted yes on Amendment G. 41%. 59% voted no. So those numbers for yes were 176,724 yeses and 249,983 no's. So a pretty decent number of people voted no.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The arguments generally made in favor of an abortion were cases of rape, incest, miscarriages, and I, again, do the research. I'm generally opposed to abortion at any time.
You're
just
pro-life.
Based on religious understanding. But I'm willing to look and learn and listen, just like you.
Mm-hmm.
But I come down very pro-life, and so there was never, like, this isn't something I had to ponder or study. I was from day one no on G, and worked to bring about a no vote on G.
My views have changed a lot, because before, when I was in school, I would have been like all the way saying, yeah, it's fine. But over these years, especially I saw this video on YouTube. It was just animation, but it was a doctor describing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he used to do them, and now he doesn't. So that's
there's
why.
Several, I don't know how many, but there's a lot of, maybe a lot's too many to say, but there are people who did work, usually like for Planned Parenthood, that when they actually began participating in these abortions and saw what was involved, left. And they went from yes to no, because you're not just disposing of a being, right? It's a human life. It has a heartbeat. It's something like, I don't remember exactly, like 21 days, there was a heartbeat.
Oh yeah, something like that.
Right? And as you progress a little bit further along and you can see the ultrasounds, you can see clearly, this is not a being. This is not a cell. This is a baby human. And, things like partial birth abortions, if people saw those, that would probably change a lot of minds.
Is that the one where it's 8 to 9 months, or is that something else?
It could be the hour prior to delivery.
So I thought that was a myth. I remember seeing Kamala Harris talking about it, saying that's a myth. But then Trump said in either Virginia or I think one of those states, he said, no, they do allow it. I was like, there's no way. So I remember Googling it. And
they do.
Because technically there is no limit. Of course, they say a lot of people don't do it, but technically there is no limit. I'm like, so all the way to 9 months? I'm like, I don't know. That seems a little extreme. And if they do it.
Yeah, I won't describe for the people who are interested have probably already looked it up, but for people who have not looked it up, it's very gruesome.
Now, what's the current abortion laws in South Dakota, though?
So the best way to do this is go to the South Dakota Secretary of Health website, because during this last legislative session, the South Dakota legislature passed a law that told the South Dakota Secretary of Health to produce a video explaining South Dakota's current abortion laws. And the Secretary of Health did that, and that video is available, and anybody can go and watch the Secretary of Health explain the current laws of South Dakota. So people often would say, well, if it's an ectopic pregnancy, South Dakota doesn't allow an abortion and the woman could die. Not true.
Mm-hmm.
An ectopic pregnancy can have the abortion. Or people say, well, if I have a miscarriage and the baby dies inside the womb or whatever, the mother could be killed because the doctor can't help her in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
Also, not true, right? South Dakota laws already exist for things like that. So that's why the tagline on the no on G signs, no on G, it's too extreme,
Mm-hmm.
right? Amendment G would have required unregulated abortion during the first trimester, meaning the state could have no regulation whatsoever of any kind covering abortions in the first trimester, which means the state couldn't even say you have to have an abortion performed by a medical professional at a medical facility because it's no regulation.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, that's why all the signs for no on G say it's too extreme. Like you could go to Walmart and have an abortion in that guy's van because no regulation, right? So let's say, like a lot of talk about underage teen girls who get pregnant, let's say they're raped, right? That's one of the arguments for abortion is they got raped. Well, under G, let's say an older predator raped a young girl and then just took her to that Walmart parking lot and made her get an abortion. There'd be no reporting requirements. There'd be no medical requirements. There'd be zero coverage. So that's not protecting that young girl. That's harming the young girl. And there'd be no accountability for that predator rapist because there'd be no requirement to report.
Okay.
So again, G was too extreme.
Okay, that explains the extreme part. Is there cases where you think it's kind of permitted? Like, what was it? Was said? Some people said. I'm trying to remember all the videos I've been watching. On both sides, rape and incest.
Mm-hmm.
You think, or from your views, is there some things that, hey, you know what, it's fine, or like, hey, no, because I'll hear like they say, well, the baby has no, it's not his fault,
right?
But what is your views on that?
So my view again is, generally speaking, no to abortion, right? Except for the life of the mother. If the mother's physical life is endangered, then I would probably be more swayed to a yes vote.
Okay.
But things like rape and incest, bad, wrong. Mm-hmm. But number one, they're so rare. Like if you, again, do research and look at reports, I forget the exact numbers, but both of those cases of rape and incest resulting in pregnancies is something like 1% or less. So 1% or less is a very small number. So to make that your main argument of why everybody should willy-nilly be able to have an abortion just because they want to, I don't think that's a good argument. But there are, again, there's studies that tell you there are a lot of couples that want a child and for whatever reason can't physically have a child. So let's say you do have a pregnancy induced by rape. There is more likely than not a couple, a family, that would love to adopt that baby. and to raise it as their own. So, yes, are you compelling the victim of rape to deliver this life? Yes, obviously.
Mhm.
But again, the innocent life had nothing to do with the rape. And life is a human right. Babies are humans. So, right, the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. If you don't have life, you can't pursue liberty or happiness. So I would say that there are other ways to deal with an unwanted pregnancy, and adoption seems like a good choice.
One thing that I remember watching, I always bring Charlie Kirk. I like his stuff. It's pretty cool.
I'll have to start watching him. Oh, and just so you know, several years ago, we had Charlie Kirk here speaking to the Clay County Republicans for our Lincoln Day dinner in the muck. And then after that Lincoln Day dinner, he went and did a student discussion session on campus.
Would he come back, you think, or?
I don't know. He was there once.
So it's not...
But, we had special ins and connections at the time to get him here. And so
it's possible, maybe.
He might. I don't know.
One thing that
he's already been here once.
One thing that Charlie Kirk mentioned when he was doing those little debates with the college kids, they're fascinating. They're amazing. Because you hear both sides. They were talking about the rape and incest thing, and I remember him, if I remember right, Charlie Kirk saying yes. Like, for example, let's say the rape. It's an act of evil, but why should we use another act of evil? That shouldn't be the case. And I kept thinking about that. I was like, hey, this you're right. And then you mentioned it. There are people that they're always looking for adoption, or they're always wanting to adopt babies. So I guess, yeah. Another thing that I was always wondering, I was like,
well, abortion, when you perform an abortion, there is a guaranteed death. Somebody always dies in an abortion.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the person who can't speak, represent, or defend themselves. Right? The aborted baby always loses in an abortion.
Yes. Now, another thing I wanted to ask, though, is because they always talk about, yes, abortion, no abortion, but you think, how can we stop from talking about that? I don't want to say stop talking about it, but like, hey, maybe protection, birth control, or, this and that, so we don't have that issue of, I feel like maybe that's not talked about a lot, so we don't get to that point.
Well, it's not like, in most cases, uninformed people that have these unwanted pregnancies. We have centers like Zoe Care.
Oh, yeah, they came here last...
Zoe Care's based up in Yankton, but they have a mobile unit that comes down here to Vermillion, and, they are pro-life. They're a pro-life organization, but they will support women and men who make either decision, right? They will love you no matter what your decision is, and they will assist you with care. And if you decide to have that baby and give birth, then they will work to assist you in the raising of that child. And so a plug for Zoe Care is they're always looking for donations or contributions to provide these services. Like they have a sonogram, right? Is it a sonogram?
Ultrasound?
An ultrasound.
Yeah.
My brain was drawing a blank. Right? They can give you a free ultrasound, so that if you're thinking about the option of abortion, right, you can see that ultrasound and you can hear that heartbeat. And then a lot of times when women see that baby and hear that heartbeat, that makes going through with a decision to have an abortion much more difficult, because they realize that what's growing inside of them is not a being. Like I said, it's not a being, it's not a cell, it's a human.
Mm-hmm.
And hearing and seeing that helps them understand. And a lot of times people will choose to have that pregnancy, to carry it through to birth. And then adoption becomes an option, or keeping it becomes an option. And Zoe Care isn't just for the women. They will work with the men as well.
Okay. It's just they're there to, like you were saying,
They're there
support.
to help, to support. Whatever your decision is, they are there to be supportive. And like everything else, that costs money. They have to pay for their facilities. They have to pay for their staff. They have to pay for the gas to drive the mobile unit around, right? All that. So if you're interested in looking into a charitable organization that focuses its mission on this topic of abortion, they're an organization that you can contribute to here, basically locally, because they're based out of Yankton and they do work here in Vermillion.
I try to contact Zoe Care if they could ever get on. I contacted them over the summer. It's Rachel, if people are wondering.
Yeah.
Never got a response. Maybe I'll try again, because I do want to talk more.
After dropping their name on the podcast, maybe they'll reach out to you.
Oh, yeah.
They'll be able to explain their mission and their role much better than me. And if I misspoke in any way, they'd be able to correct.
Speaking of those elections that just happened, so I thought, you hear people saying, how the country is divided and this and that.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was kind of like an over-exaggeration until after the elections. I was on Twitter, and it was, so you could see this is what I'll tell you. There's a lot of racism that just came out against Latinos and blacks, saying it's the people and, man, I'll describe it. These are some of the comments I remember. It says, "Way to go, Latinos. Hopefully Trump deports all you guys because of your decision," and stuff like that. I thought it was kind of funny, but kind of hurt a little bit. But then,
Trump won't be deporting any Latinos that voted for him or that voted for Kamala, because, assuming that they were legally Catholic votes.
Yeah, because you got to be a citizen to vote.
You have to be a citizen to vote. So the only people that Trump talked about deporting was illegals.
Mm-hmm.
Illegals. People who, the very first act of being in this country was to break the law.
Mm-hmm.
All nations have laws about who can come in and how you do it. So, for example, a lot of people said, if Trump wins, I'm going to go to Canada. No, you're not. Canada's border is closed. Canada has a problem with immigration, and they've basically closed their borders to new immigrants. And you fleeing America would be an immigrant. And Canada, you would get to the border of Canada, they was like, we're not taking you. I mean, there's an article in Reuters written, I think, the end of September 2024 that says something like, Canada's border closed. We're like the only country that, for at least the past 4 years, has said, come on in, we don't care. You can't run a country that way. You can't have a country that way.
Why did they, what was all that? Like, why did they accept so many people, or they just stopped? Like,
who, Canada or us?
No, us, during those few years.
Yeah.
What made that change?
So there's the conspiracy theory talk about demographic destiny, right? Who talks about demographic destiny? And each side points the finger at the other side. But what I have seen is folks in the Democrat Party are the ones who talked about demographic destiny. And that meant a replacement theory. So Latinos who voted for Trump, right, are not voting for Democrats. So let's say Latinos who voted for Republicans are not voting for Democrats. So we need the Latino vote, right, in the Democrat Party. So how can we're probably not going to bring them back through our policies and our politics. So we need to replace them. How can we replace them? Open borders. Bring in floods of people to replace the voters we lost to the Republican cause. So it's called the replacement theory. And an easy way to do that is have open borders. And then this immigration discussion that we've had for years and years and years and years under both Republican and Democrat presidents and under both Republican and Democrat Congresses. We can just bring in a whole bunch of them, and generally speaking, we assume that most of those immigrants will, at least initially, vote Democrat because you get stuff, right? In very broad terms, Republicans say work for it, earn it. And again, very broad terms offend the audience, I'm sure, but a general philosophy, my understanding of the Democrat Party is we'll give you stuff. Like, here, you can have this for free, right? But it's not really free. Somebody had to pay the taxes so that there was money to give you free stuff. But my understanding is the assumption is a lot of those illegals who come into America will become Democrat voters. So they will replace minority voters that transition to the Republican Party.
One thing a lot of people might not know with, with Latinos or Hispanics, mostly like the older generations, they're more conservative. Some people don't know that.
We saw that in this election, right? When you look at the demographic breakdown of how people voted, Republicans made really good gains in minority communities. A lot, and again, a lot is a broad word, but more minority communities voted Republican in this last election than have in the past. And so my daughter-in-law, who's a wonderful person, immigrated to America. And she did it legally. And it was a pain in the butt. Like I had to sponsor her because you have to have legal immigration required that somebody in America promised to pay for everything that she would need. And you had to go through this long process, and you had to go through interviews, and you had to go up to Sioux Falls, and you had to go to your naturalization. Well, I guess you didn't have to go, but her naturalization ceremony years later was in Mount Rushmore. So she went through the legal process, and a lot of times during that process, me and my son and her and I would say, like, man, you should just go down to Mexico and cross the border. Because, right, if you're here legally, you don't get any of those free things that illegals get. You get none of that when you do it legally. So a lot of times it's like, this is just such a pain in the butt. Man, you guys ought to just go to Mexico and cross the border. Come back in illegally and get all that free stuff, right? So, but that's not the way to do it, right? She immigrated legally, and it took work, and it wasn't instantaneous, and you got no free stuff. Like, when she was pregnant, she couldn't go get WIC for her. She couldn't have any government handouts for her. Now, for the baby, yes. For her, no. But now that she's a citizen, she can have all of the access to all of those resources that citizens have. But yeah, legal immigration is a pain in the butt. And it immediately brings nothing to you. Whereas illegal immigration, you get all kinds of protections and things given to you. But I think legal immigrants, especially in the Latino community, showed during this last election that they are against illegal immigration. They oppose that. Like, there's some county in southern Texas that hadn't voted Republican since 1892. 1892 is a long time ago. And in this election, they voted Republican. And a lot of people say that it's because of illegal immigration. Because the illegals come here and they take their jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So legal immigration is what we need to have. And here's the person that the president does not fix immigration. Whether it's a Republican or a Democrat president, they do not fix legal or illegal immigration. The executive sees that the laws are executed.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's arguments with how do you allocate the resources that are available, right? So sometimes the president will choose to work in enforcing this law really hard while not enforcing this law really hard. And then the argument is, why? Because I don't have enough resources to enforce both. And this one's more important to us. It goes back to just like the tax argument. The people responsible for our immigration laws are the people in Congress. If we want our immigration laws fixed, or we want our border fixed, Congress has to do that work, not the president.
Mm-hmm.
Either president, whether he's Democrat, Republican, independent, the executive enforces the law. Congress creates the law. So Congress, this mess of our immigration laws is at Congress's doorstep. It's their fault. It's their responsibility to fix it, just like it's their responsibility to prepare the tax code. The president enforces the law. The judges interpret the law. Congress writes the law. Now, the president gets a veto option on laws, right? So he can have some impact there. If he disagrees with the laws that Congress pass, he can veto. And then that just says, Congress, you need to go back and do a little bit more work. And usually when there's a signing or a veto going on, the president will write a note for future reference on why he is or is not vetoing this law.
How do we get those congressmen to listen to us? Is it just by voting the right one, or do we just contact them? What's the easiest way?
So you need to stay in touch with your congressional and Senate representatives. You need to write them. You can email them, that's fine. You can write them a physical letter. You can call their office and talk to their staff. Sometimes you can leave a voice message if no one picks up and answers. But our elected representatives at every level of government, not just the federal Congress, but state and local officials, they need to hear from the people who voted for them, or in some cases, the people who voted against them. You need to work with your elected representatives. And if it's important to you and it's important to your neighbors, if you relay that to your congressman, it should become important to your congressman.
So let's say I get Dusty on.
Yeah.
What would we're trying to work on that. Chris Cass and we were talking about it, and because he said, "Hey, Dusty would be a great person." I was like, "Well, how do I get him?" Because I've tried contacting Christy Nome. I don't know how that works out, but he said he'll try.
Get more viewers.
Hopefully, but he said
the bigger your audience, the more likely they are to show up.
Yeah, but he said he's going to try to get him on. So I would, but I don't know. Let's say if I did.
Why did Cheryl Johnson come on?
I got in contact with her campaign.
Yeah, but why did she come on?
Oh, just publicity
to reach the people, right?
Yeah.
So a really good time to have got Dusty on would have been prior to the election, because what do candidates need before the election?
They need all that publicity.
They need votes.
Yeah.
Right?
So that would have been a better time.
I'm not saying he won't come on.
Okay.
Talking to your constituents is an important thing, but again, broadly speaking, most politicians care about their constituents right before an election.
Okay. So that's why I got a lot more of the candidates, because it was
because they're candidates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I know for the next time.
Because I need your vote.
Yeah. I didn't think about that. Well, it's because I was talking with them and I said, how hard would it be to get Christy? And they said, right now it's very hard. Well, it's because she's not running. Maybe that's why.
Yeah, if this was 2 years from now, you would probably have a lot better chance. Plus, here's the other thing. Candidates' time and money is limited as well. So if you have an audience of 12, is it worth my limited time to come here and spend an hour with you? If you have an audience of 20,000, it's a lot more worth my time, right? Which is why podcasters are always talking about the number of viewers they have. Because if you write to a candidate and say, hey, I've got 20 people who watch my podcast, would you come down here and talk to us?
Probably not.
Or if you say, hey, I've got 10,000 people who watch my podcast, would you come down here and talk to us? Where is that time better spent?
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot more likely that I'll come spend an hour with you if I'm going to reach 20,000 voters.
So why didn't Kamala Harris go on the Joe Rogan show? Because that one reached, when he did Trump and J.D. Vance, man, that reached out to a lot of people.
So, again, I live in this community here, but I will say, I'll say what I think. I'm not Kamala Harris. Okay. I don't know why she didn't, but I suspect she didn't because she didn't want to embarrass herself. Like, what's one of the big things that we associate with Kamala Harris and this campaign cycle? Word salad. Like, answering a question with a 10-minute spew of words that doesn't answer the question.
Oh, yeah, that she did do that a few times.
So,
yeah, I remember that.
Know your audience, right? Like, who's Joe Rogan's primary audience? Is it Democrats or is it conservatives? I don't know. It's probably more conservatives, though. So what audience would she be appealing to, right? All these assessments go into, where do I go spend my limited time? And so when Trump did his interview, there was no teleprompter, right? I mean, we've seen many, many times throughout the campaign where when teleprompters stopped working, talk stopped. Right? And there has been a lot of talk about, can't think of her own words to say, just has to read them off a screen that somebody else wrote for her. Again, I'm not Kamala. I'm not on her staff. I don't know. I'm just saying those are things that I've heard. So why didn't she go? Probably because she thought it would be more harmful than helpful.
Did you hear about that conspiracy theory that I just saw it with that Joe Biden? You know how like he, it looks like he's not like 100% there sometimes.
Yeah.
Someone has mentioned that it was the whole plan. Like he did that so Kamala could run, so Trump looks good, and technically Biden and Trump were working together.
I have not heard that.
You haven't seen that?
No, I have not heard that, and I would, without further research and analysis, I would check that off as a false.
Have you seen Biden wear the MAGA hat?
I did see that.
Yeah, so that's why they're also explaining to you. Like, see, there's that evidence, and then
I think that was intended to be more sarcastic than genuine. So, yeah, I have not heard or seen that theory, but initially I leaned to the side of, no, that's not what happened.
Well, we're almost at 2 hours.
What?
Yeah,
holy cow.
I need to wrap it up. I do got one question though. It involves in the military. So I always ask, because a lot of the friends I got that are in the military or they always tell me like they don't trust the government, this and that. But that's why I had a question. Like most of them don't, they say the government lies or this and that, but you guys work for the government, or is it completely like a different perspective? Kind of feel me?
Yeah. So when I was in the Army at all levels, from private through colonel, working on a forward observer team, all the way up to working with the Pentagon, I honestly never felt any type of political influence. Like, I knew there was some people who had, like, so for example, when CNN first became a big thing, we often had that on all day at our units or all day at our headquarters. We would watch CNN because they often had the earliest breaking news of something going on that maybe we would have to respond to. And, there's those water cooler discussions, but I felt like everybody that I worked with leaned very hard right. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean white supremacist hard right. I mean, like, they were just very conservative in their views and their values. Again, that was my impression. And when I was a private, I couldn't harm anyone in their career, but I still felt like my privates and specialists and sergeant friends had a very conservative bend to their values, right? And so I couldn't do anything for them other than, sweep the floor, go get the coffee, and go down to the motor pool, do the maintenance on the quarter-ton Jeep, which is how long ago I was a private, for your folks who want to research facts. All the way up, like, through being a colonel when I was in charge of people and offices at the Pentagon. But when I retired, and other folks that I had worked with in the Army and across the other services, when I retired, like on Facebook, I would continue to talk my conservative values. And some of my friends had 100% opposite degree values. Mm-hmm. There was a warrant officer in particular who we got along really well. I thought we did, right? Of course, I was a lieutenant colonel and then a colonel, and he was a warrant officer, so I was a senior person. I thought we got along really well. I thought we did a lot of good work. And after he and I were both retired, turned out that we agreed on almost nothing as far as a political spectrum after we were retired. And based on those after retirement disagreements, we parted ways on Facebook. We unfriended each other, and I have no idea what he's doing today. But so I didn't feel like the government was lying or screwing anybody. Like, I believed when George Bush told us Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. And because why would I doubt him? He's the president. They got access to all kinds of resources and information. But while I was in Iraq on my first tour, we were tasked to go find some of these weapons of mass destruction storage sites, and didn't pan out. So, does the government lie to you? Probably. Like, if you have top secrets and people ask you a question, you can't reveal that top secret information, right? Mm-hmm. That's like when people are testifying before Congress and they ask them a question and they'll say something like, Congressman or Senator, I can't answer that question in an open forum. I'd be happy to answer it, behind closed doors. Could that just be hiding from not giving the answer? Yes. Mm-hmm. But there's also probably a lot of truth in that statement. Like, what you're asking me is classified, and I can't share classified information in an open forum because the president hasn't authorized me to, which that's the law. So, and sometimes there's military deception. There's deception campaigns that go on. Like, again, during World War II, General Patton was put in command of the Ghost Army, right? The Ghost Army, because the Germans thought that Patton would be the leader of whatever came across the channel, and so wherever Patton was must be the main effort. And so the military and the government used that as a great big deception. Was that lying to the people? Kind of. Was it for a national strategic reason? Yes. So did Patton have to go along with that story? Yes. So I've been retired since October 31st, 2017. And I am more open to the idea of the government lying to us now than I was when I was in the government. Like, because being in the Army, it's a federal government branch.
Yeah.
I never felt like I was lying to the people. I never felt like the government was lying to me. Like, when you had to go get vaccinations, I'd go first in line or as close to the front of the line as possible. Number one, because I didn't want to wait in line all day. But, you go get it done. It's a requirement. You go get it done. I never questioned any of that.
Mm-hmm.
The flu shots I always seem to get sick right after I got the flu shot, even though the flu shot can't make you sick. But, next year I was right there for my flu shot, ready to go. Since retiring, since all of these things have occurred in our society, I'm a little bit more skeptical.
So you think since they announced that, oh yeah, UFOs are kind of real, you think they're lying?
Well, so...
Or is that like a different topic?
So UFOs are awesome because U just means unidentified, F is flying, and O is object. So an unidentified flying object is something in the air that I can't identify. Like if looking out your window here, there's a contrail. There's a plane making a contrail out there. It's a flying object that I can't identify. So to me, that's a UFO. So UFOs definitely exist in that context. But do I think there's extraterrestrial UFOs? Yeah, why not? The galaxy's immense. And again, if you go back to religious philosophies and beliefs, our God has created many habitable planets, and there's probably life on them. Why couldn't they be here? So I'm open to the idea of alien UFOs, but now they call them something now. Now they're like
UAPs, right?
Unexplained aerial phenomena.
Yeah.
Unexplained aerial phenomena. I'm open to that. I don't find any conflict that there may or may not be aliens that visit Earth from other habitable planets. I'm okay with that.
That'll be for another episode now.
I'm okay with it.
All right. We got to wrap it up because we're hitting that 2-hour mark.
Yeah, but nobody wants to listen for 2 hours.
So I'm going to wrap it up, but I do want to thank you so much for being on again.
All right. And I would just like to conclude with a disclaimer. All of the conversation that we've had and my answers and my ideas are based on the best of my knowledge right now. So, like when you ask for me to speak on behalf of other people or other parties, like why did they do something? I just gave you my best understanding. So, if something was wrong, or like if you get Kamala on the show and she goes, what church said was completely wrong, I didn't do that for these or whatever, right? I'm just admitting up front that I can't speak authoritatively for them because I am not them and I was not there.
Don't worry, I get my info from Google, so I don't know how accurate that is.
All right.
Or should be good. Sweet.
All right. Thanks.